For 65 years, nobody came. It's a statement that feels impossible, especially when you're talking about a child. But for a little boy found in Philadelphia, it was the chilling reality. This story begins on a cold, gray February morning in 1957. A young man cutting through a wooded area made a discovery that would haunt an entire nation. Inside a plain cardboard box, the kind that once held a baby's bassinet, lay the small, naked body of a boy. He couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 years old. The scene itself was a paradox. The police photographs show him wrapped carefully in a thin, worn blanket, placed in the box with an almost ceremonial care. It was a gesture that stood in stark contrast to the violence his short life had clearly endured. There was no identification, no name. And most disturbingly, no one had reported him missing. This is the detail that still sends a shiver down the spines of investigators decades later. It wasn't just that a child was murdered, but that his absence from the world went completely unnoticed. The medical examiner's report painted a grim picture of neglect. The boy was severely malnourished, weighing only 30 pounds. His body was covered in bruises, some old and some fresh, telling a story of repeated abuse. Someone had given him a crude, hasty haircut just days before he died. His fingernails had been neatly filed down. It was as if someone was preparing him for something, but what? Desperate for answers, authorities dressed him in donated clothing, took new photographs, and released his image to newspapers across America. Posters went up on street corners, in shop windows, and at police stations, all asking the same question. Does anyone know this boy? His solemn little face stared out, a silent plea for recognition. Thousands of tips flooded in. The theories were wild and varied. One woman claimed her mother had bought him from human traffickers. Another popular theory suggested he was a refugee from the recent Hungarian Revolution, smuggled into the country and hidden away from the world. Detectives investigated foster homes, contacted hospitals, and searched orphanages. Every lead was a dead end. There was no thread to pull, no name that stuck, no family that stepped forward to claim their son. Even after his face was known across the country, he remained an enigma. He became known as the boy in the box. Later, the press gave him a more formal, heartbreaking title, America's Unknown Child. As time passed, the newspapers moved on to new stories. The flood of tips dwindled to a trickle and then stopped. The case grew cold. What haunts me most about this story isn't just the act of violence, it's what that violence represents. It means that somewhere in Philadelphia in 1957, a child existed in such complete and total invisibility that even his death didn't create a ripple. He had no one. No mother checking on him before bed. No teacher wondering why he wasn't in his seat at school. No neighbor who might have questioned his sudden absence from the street. He wasn't just killed. He was erased from existence while he was still living. Let that sink in for a moment. A living, breathing human being was on this earth for 4 or 5 years, and when he was gone, the world didn't even pause. The world didn't search for him because the world never knew he was there. His body was buried in a potter's field. In 1998, they exhumed his grave, hoping the forensic science of the time could offer new clues. They took fingerprints, footprints, and physical measurements. Still nothing. In 2019, they exhumed him again. This time they had a new weapon, modern DNA technology. The hope was that now, finally, his bones might speak. Perhaps this time someone would finally know his name. And they did. In December of 2022, after 65 long years, Philadelphia detectives made the announcement the world had been waiting for. The boy in the box had an identity, Joseph Augustus Zarelli. A name, a birth date, January 13, 1953. In an instant, he was no longer a ghost. He was a real person. The mystery, they said, was solved. The case could finally be put to rest. But here's the thing that still keeps investigators and amateur sleuths awake at night. Knowing his name doesn't answer the most terrifying question. Why did no one come looking for him? His parents were identified through the same DNA work, and they were long dead. They had never come forward. Not in 1957, when their son's face was in every paper. Not in all the decades that followed. Joseph was so completely erased that even his own family pretended he never existed. The gravestone in Ivy Hill Cemetery that once read America's Unknown Child now proudly bears his name. But the larger mystery, the one that defines the true horror of this case, remains unsolved. How does a child disappear so entirely that his own blood doesn't search for him? What kind of life must a child lead to be invisible, even to the people who created him? Joseph Augustus Zarelli's killer was never brought to justice. But the real crime, the one that still chills the city of Philadelphia, is that he lived and died in such complete anonymity that it took over 6 decades of dedicated police work just to prove he was ever here at all. He became something worse than a victim. He became a ghost in a city full of the living, a child so thoroughly forgotten that America had to be reminded he ever existed. Thank you for listening.